You see that sign there hanging above the doorway? Haven House, founded 1876. 54 years that sign's been swaying in the Texas wind. 54 years of women finding shelter when the world turned them away. 54 years of children growing up safe when they might have grown up hungry and afraid. But I'll tell you something, miss, something most folks don't know. That sign almost never got hung. The woman who founded this place, she almost gave up before she started. Almost turned around and went back east to nothing. Almost let shame and fear win out over hope. Her name was Savannah Mitchell. And if you'll give me an afternoon, I'll tell you how a mail-order bride left standing alone at a train station became the most respected woman in 3 counties. How a cowboy too scared to love again learned to open his heart one more time. How a town learned that mercy matters more than judgment. I know because I was there. My name's Tommy Fletcher. I'm 73 years old now, and my memory ain't what it used to be for some things. Can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, truth be told. But August of 1875, that I remember clear as yesterday's sky. I was 18 then, just a green kid working cattle on the Double R Ranch, didn't know much about women or heartbreak or any of that grown-up business, but I knew horses, and I knew when something beautiful walked into a broken man's life. What I saw that summer taught me more about courage and kindness than all the years before or since. So settle in. This is going to take a while, but I promise you, it's worth the telling. Let me take you back. Back to August 1875, to a little town called Willow Creek, Texas. Back to the day before everything changed. Now, you gotta understand what Willow Creek was like back then. It wasn't much to look at, I'll grant you that. One main street of packed dirt that turned to mud when it rained. False front buildings trying to look bigger than they were. A church, a saloon, a general store, a bank. Maybe 300 souls living within shouting distance of each other. But it was growing. That's the important thing. Every month brought new families, new hope. We had a proper school by then, a doctor who didn't double as the undertaker, even a lending library with 42 books. People came to Willow Creek to start over, to build something from nothing. Most of them made it, some didn't. It was Monday, August 9th, when I first heard the gossip. I was in town with Pete Carson, the Double R's foreman. Hot day, like all August days in Texas. Heat came up off the dirt in waves you could see. We'd stopped at Miller's General Store to pick up supplies. Pete was outside loading flour sacks while I went in for the order list. That's when I heard the women talking. Mrs. Caldwell, the dressmaker, was at the counter with 2 other ladies. They didn't notice me come in, or maybe they didn't care. Women's talk, they probably figured. Nothing that concerned a young cowboy. Harold Whitcomb's mail-order bride is arriving next Tuesday, Mrs. Caldwell was saying. She had a kind face, Mrs. Caldwell did, round and soft, like risen dough. The woman next to her sniffed. That man ordering himself a wife like she's livestock from a catalog. It's disgraceful. Now, Victoria, Mrs. Caldwell said gently. That was Mrs. Peaton she was talking to, the banker's wife. Always dressed fine, always had opinions about everything. Plenty of good marriages start that way. My cousin in Dallas. Your cousin in Dallas is the exception, Mrs. Peaton interrupted. Her voice had edges to it, sharp enough to cut. Most of these arrangements end in heartbreak. Mark my words. The third woman, Mrs. Henderson, leaned in closer. I was pretending to study the pickle barrel, but I was listening hard. 18-year-old boys are curious creatures. I heard she's coming all the way from Boston, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dropping like she was sharing state secrets. A city woman, can you imagine, coming out here to marry Harold Whitcomb? Mrs. Peaton made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I wonder what kind of woman answers those advertisements. What kind of desperation drives a person to travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger? There was something in her voice, not just judgment, something else underneath. Something that sounded almost like pain, but I was too young to hear it then. Mrs. Caldwell's voice turned gentler. Desperate ones, I suppose. Women with nowhere else to turn. Exactly my point, Mrs. Peaton said. Harold Whitcomb is getting exactly what he deserves. Some desperate woman with no other prospects. I give it 6 months before they're both miserable. I grabbed the supply list off the counter and got out of there. Didn't want to hear any more. Outside, Pete was strapping down the last flour sack. He looked at my face and raised an eyebrow. "Women talking?" he asked. "About Harold Whitcomb's mail-order bride," I said, "coming in on Tuesday's train." Pete's jaw tightened. He didn't like Whitcomb much. None of us did. The man talked big about his cattle fortune, but everyone knew he spent more time in the saloon than on his land. "Poor woman," Pete said quietly, "whoever she is." We rode back to the ranch in silence. The sun beat down on our backs. Dust rose from the horses' hooves, and I thought about what it must be like to be desperate enough to travel across the country to marry a man you'd never met. I couldn't imagine it then, but I was about to learn. That same afternoon, Quentin Ross rode out to the cemetery. I didn't know that at the time, of course. He told me about it years later, when we were both older, and he'd learned to talk about the things that haunted him. The cemetery sat on a small rise about 2 miles from town, just a patch of ground with a white fence around it and maybe 30 graves. Simple wooden markers, most of them. A few stones for the families that could afford it. Quentin's mother was buried there. Margaret Ross. Died 5 years earlier, consumption. The same disease that had taken so many women on the frontier. Next to her was an empty plot. That's where Quentin's father would go when his time came, and next to that, another empty space. That one had a name already. Lucinda Brennan. Died 1872. Quentin's fiancée. Dead 3 years in the ground. He stood between the graves, hat in his hands. 30 years old, but looking older in that moment. The weight of loss does that to a man. "Mama," he said quietly, "just to the air, to the memory. I've been thinking about your promise." The wind rustled through the grass. Nothing answered but the birds. "There's a woman coming to town tomorrow. Mail-order bride for Harold Whitcomb. I heard about it in passing, and I got a bad feeling, Mama, real bad." He crouched down, pulled a few weeds from around his mother's marker. "You remember what you told me before you passed? You made me promise to help folks in need, especially women and children. You said that's how we stay human in this hard land." His voice cracked a little. Even years later, telling me this story, he had to stop and clear his throat. "I think Harold's going to leave her stranded, Mama. I think he's going to take one look at her and run. He's that kind of man. And if he does, she'll have nowhere to go, no one to help." He stood up, put his hat back on. "So I'm going to be there tomorrow, at the station, just in case." He turned to Lucinda's grave then, stood there for a long moment. "I know what you'd say," he told her, told the memory of her. "You'd say I should help. You always had the biggest heart of anyone I knew." The wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Storm coming, maybe, or maybe just heat playing tricks with the air. "I'm not trying to replace you," Quentin said. "I need you to know that. This isn't about forgetting, it's just about keeping a promise." He stood there until the sun started sinking toward the horizon. Then he mounted his horse and rode back toward the ranch. He didn't sleep much that night. Neither did I, though for different reasons. I was young and restless, excited about the coming roundup. I didn't know yet that my life was about to change, that all our lives were about to change. Sometimes the most important moments start quiet as a whisper. Tuesday morning came hot and bright. The train from El Paso was due at 11 o'clock. It was usually on time, barring trouble on the tracks. Quentin was at the station by 9:30. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, just saddled his horse, rode into town, and found a spot in the shade of the telegraph office where he could see the platform without being too obvious. He waited. The station master, old Pete Daniels, swept the platform, straightened the benches, checked his pocket watch every few minutes like that would make the train come faster. A few other folks drifted in as the hour approached. Mr. Henderson, waiting for a shipment of tools. Mrs. Miller, expecting her sister from Austin. A couple of cowboys heading east for work, but no Harold Whitcomb. The minutes ticked by. 10 o'clock, 10:30, 10:45. Still no Whitcomb. Quentin's jaw got tighter with each passing minute. At 10:58, a rider came fast down Main Street. Harold Whitcomb on a bay mare, dust flying from the horse's hooves. He pulled up at the hitching rail near the station, dismounted, stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Not from the ride, Quentin thought. From nerves. Whitcomb was 35, going soft around the middle, weak chin hidden by a carefully trimmed beard. He wore his Sunday suit, but it hung on him wrong, like he wasn't comfortable in his own skin. The man paced, checked his pocket watch, ran his hand through his hair, paced some more. He was scared, Quentin realized. Terrified. And that's when Quentin knew for certain Harold Whitcomb was going to run. At 11:02, the train whistle screamed across the prairie. Everyone on the platform turned to look. Down the tracks, black smoke rose against the blue sky. The engine was coming. Harold Whitcomb's face went pale as milk. The train pulled into the station with a great hissing of steam and squealing of brakes. The conductor jumped down, set his step stool, and started helping passengers disembark. First came Mr. Henderson's tools, crated and heavy. Then Mrs. Miller's sister, a plump woman in a traveling dress. Then the two cowboys, rough men with bedrolls and few words. Then nothing for a moment. Then a young woman appeared in the doorway. Even from across the street, Quentin could see she was beautiful. Auburn hair tucked under a bonnet, a simple blue traveling dress wrinkled from the journey, and in her arms, a baby, maybe 6 months old. The woman looked around the platform, her eyes hopeful, searching, looking for the man who'd promised to meet her, to marry her, to give her a new life. Harold Whitcomb took one look at her, one look at the baby, and he turned and walked away. Not ran, walked. Calm as you please, like he was just heading to the general store for tobacco. But he kept walking, past the general store, past the church, straight to where his horse was tied. Quentin stepped out from the shadows. "Harold!" Whitcomb jumped like he'd been shot, spun around. "Ross," he said. His voice was high, guilty. "I didn't see you there." "Apparently not," Quentin said. His voice was quiet, dangerous quiet. "You heading somewhere?" Whitcomb's eyes darted back toward the station. The woman was still standing there, holding her baby. The station master was approaching her, his face sympathetic. "Breaking bad news." "I can't do it," Whitcomb said. His voice cracked. "The baby. She didn't tell me about the baby. I asked for a wife, not a child," Quentin finished. "A family?" "I'm not ready for that," Whitcomb said. He was pleading now, wanting understanding. "I thought it would just be a woman, someone to cook and clean. I didn't sign up for raising someone else's bastard." The word hung in the air between them. Quentin took a step closer. He was bigger than Whitcomb, broader in the shoulders, harder in the eyes. "So you're leaving her stranded," Quentin said. It wasn't a question. "It's not my problem," Whitcomb said. But he couldn't meet Quentin's eyes when he said it. "I'm heading to California, fresh start, already got my wagon packed. I'm leaving today." "You sent for her," Quentin said. "You made her promises in your letters. You told her to come all the way from Boston. I didn't promise to raise another man's child." "No, you just promised to be a man of your word." They stared at each other. The heat pressed down on them. From the station, the sound of the woman's voice carried on the wind. She was talking to the station master. Her voice was steady, but Quentin could hear the thread of fear underneath. "What are you going to do, Ross?" Whitcomb asked. "Stop me? Force me to marry her?" Quentin looked at him for a long moment, considered it, then shook his head. "No," he said. "A woman deserves better than a man who has to be forced. You go on to California, Harold. Run like the coward you are." Whitcomb's face flushed red. "Now see here." "I see fine," Quentin interrupted. "I see a man who makes promises he won't keep. I see a man who'd leave a woman and child stranded in a strange town with no help. I see exactly what you are." He paused, let the words sink in. "But that woman over there, she doesn't need to see it. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to the sheriff's office. You're going to leave her whatever money you've got. You're going to write her a letter explaining that you've changed your mind. And then you're going to disappear to California and never come back to Willow Creek. And if I don't? Quentin smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Then I'm going to walk over to that platform and tell her exactly what kind of man you are, loud enough for everyone to hear. And you know how small towns talk, Harold. You'll never be able to do business anywhere in Texas again. Whitcomb's face went from red to white. His hand trembled on his horse's reins. Fine, he said. Fine. I'll go to the sheriff, leave her some money, but that's it. After that, she's not my problem. No, Quentin agreed. She's not your problem. He didn't say what he was thinking. Didn't say, she's mine now, but he felt it settle into his chest like a stone dropping into still water. Whitcomb mounted his horse and rode toward the sheriff's office. Quentin watched him go, made sure he actually went inside before turning his attention back to the station. The woman was still standing there, still holding her baby, still trying to understand what the station master was telling her. The train pulled away with a great huffing of steam, heading west, leaving her behind. She stood alone on that platform with her trunk at her feet and her baby in her arms, and Quentin Ross took a deep breath and started walking toward her. I didn't see any of this myself, you understand. I was back at the ranch working cattle with Pete and the other hands. But Quentin told me the story later. Told it so many times I can see it clear as if I'd been standing there myself. He crossed the street slow, careful. Didn't want to spook her. She looked ready to bolt like a deer that's caught a hunter's scent. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought. Maybe 21, 22, thin but not frail. Her face had good bones, strong chin, eyes that were green as new leaves. Those eyes were fighting back tears. The baby in her arms was fussing, not crying yet, but working up to it. The woman bounced her gently, making little soothing sounds. "Ma'am," the station master was saying, "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but Mr. Whitcomb, he ain't coming. Left word at the sheriff's office. Said there's been a change of circumstance." The woman's face went very still, very quiet, like she was pulling herself together from the inside out. "I see," she said. Her voice was cultured, Eastern, every word pronounced careful and clear. "And did he say what I'm to do, where I'm to go?" The station master looked uncomfortable. "No, ma'am, can't say he did." She looked down at the baby, then at her trunk, then at the town stretching out before her, the heat shimmering off the dirt streets, the rough buildings, the hard land. "Of course not," she said quietly. "That would require him to care." That's when Quentin stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. His voice was gentle, respectful. "My name is Quentin Ross. I couldn't help but overhear your situation." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were wary, defensive. A woman alone learns quick not to trust strange men. "Yes," she said, just that one word, not giving anything away. "I run a ranch about 5 miles outside town," Quentin said. The double R. "If you need help, ma'am, I'd be glad to offer it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of help? Smart woman, Quentin thought. Doesn't trust easy. "Practical help," he said. "A ride to the sheriff's office so you can collect whatever Mr. Whitcomb left for you. After that, we can figure out your options." "And what do you want in return?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Just a little, just enough to make the baby fuss more. "Nothing, ma'am," Quentin said, "except maybe to know I did the right thing." They looked at each other, the woman studying him, trying to decide if he was honest or just another kind of threat. The baby started to cry for real then, a thin, tired wail, the sound of a child who'd been traveling too long in too much heat. The woman's face crumpled, just for a second. Then she pulled it back together. But Quentin had seen it, the moment when her strength almost broke. "My daughter is hungry," she said, "and hot. And I have nowhere to feed her, nowhere to rest. Let me help," Quentin said. "Please." Another long moment, the baby crying, the sun beating down, the whole town watching from windows and doorways, gossip spreading already. Then the woman nodded, just once, sharp and decisive. "My name is Savannah Mitchell," she said, "and this is my daughter, Emma. Not my niece, not my sister's child, my daughter." She said it proud, defiant, daring him to judge. Quentin's respect for her went up another notch. "Pleased to meet you both, Miss Mitchell," he said. He touched his hat. "My wagon's just around the corner. If you'll permit me to carry your trunk?" She hesitated, then nodded again. Quentin lifted the trunk like it weighed nothing. It didn't, actually. Everything she owned in the world, and it barely filled one small trunk. They walked together down the platform, the station master watching, the town watching, history being made and nobody knowing it yet. Savannah Mitchell held her crying daughter close, walked with her head high, refused to show the fear that must have been eating her alive, and Quentin Ross led her toward his wagon, toward the double R, toward a future neither of them could have imagined. "Miss Mitchell," he said as they reached the wagon, "I know you don't know me, don't have any reason to trust me, but I give you my word as a Christian and a Texan that I mean you no harm. You and your daughter are safe with me." She looked at him, really looked, her green eyes searching his face for lies. Whatever she saw there, it must have satisfied her. "Thank you, Mr. Ross," she said quietly. "You're very kind." "It's nothing," he said. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. It was the moment when two broken people found each other in the dust and heat of a Texas summer, found each other and decided, without even knowing they were deciding, to take a chance on hope. The baby's cries faded as Quentin helped Savannah into the wagon. He settled Emma in her mother's arms, then climbed up beside them and took the reins. "First stop, the sheriff's office," he said. "Then we'll see about getting you and little Emma somewhere cool, somewhere safe." Savannah didn't answer, just held her daughter and stared straight ahead. But Quentin saw her shoulders relax, just a fraction. She'd taken the first step, she'd accepted help. And that, as it turned out, was the beginning of everything. I'll tell you more in a bit, about what happened at the sheriff's office, about the ride out to the ranch, about the moment when Savannah Mitchell first saw the double R and realized she might have found something she didn't even know she was looking for. But first, I need to rest my voice a spell. Old man's privilege. Besides, some stories need breathing room, need time to settle in your mind before the next part comes. So let that sit with you for a moment. A young woman, a baby, a cowboy with a promise to keep, and a whole town watching to see what would happen next. That's how it started. That's how the legend began, not with a gunfight or a gold strike or any of the dramatic things you hear about in Western tales. Just with one man saying to a stranger, "Let me help." Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. Where was I? Right. Quentin and Savannah heading into town. Her with that baby in her arms and everything she owned in a trunk. Him with a promise to keep and no clear idea what came next. Now, I need to tell you something I didn't understand until years later. Something about the way Quentin was raised, because it matters to what happened next. But first, let me tell you about the sheriff's office. Sheriff Morgan was a good man, fair, kind when he could be, firm when he had to be. He'd fought in the war, came west after, wanted to build something better than what he'd left behind. When Quentin helped Savannah down from the wagon and they walked into his office, the sheriff's face told the whole story. He knew. He'd been expecting this. "Miss Mitchell, I presume," he said, standing up from his desk. His voice was gentle, careful. "Yes, sir," Savannah said. Her voice was steady, but I imagine her heart was pounding. Mine would have been. "Mr. Whitcomb was here about an hour ago," the sheriff said. He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. "He left this for you, asked me to deliver it when you arrived." Savannah took the envelope. Her hands didn't shake. That impressed me when Quentin told me about it later. Most folks would have been trembling like leaves. She opened it right there, read it standing up. Quentin said he could see her face go pale, see her jaw tighten. But she didn't cry, didn't make a sound. When she finished reading, she folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. "I see," was all she said. "Ma'am," the sheriff started, "I'm sorry." "How much did he leave?" she interrupted, not rude, just practical, needing to know the facts. Sheriff Morgan looked uncomfortable. $20, ma'am." $20. Not even enough for a train ticket halfway back to Boston. Savannah stood there for a moment just breathing. The baby stirred in her arms, but didn't wake. "Is there a boarding house in town?" she asked. "Somewhere I might stay while I consider my options?" The sheriff and Quentin exchanged a glance. "Mrs. Holloway runs a boarding house," the sheriff said slowly. "But she doesn't take children or situations." Situations. That's what they called unmarried mothers back then. Situations. Savannah's face didn't change. "I understand. Is there anywhere else?" Silence, long and heavy as the heat outside. That's when Quentin spoke up. "Miss Mitchell, I mentioned I run a ranch outside town, the Double R. We have a cabin sitting empty. Used to be the foreman's quarters before we built him a house closer to the main barn. It's small, but it's clean and comfortable." Savannah looked at him, wary again, that wall going back up. "Mr. Ross, I appreciate your kindness, but I can't simply move on to your property. I have no means to pay rent, and I won't be charity." "It wouldn't be charity," Quentin said. He'd thought this through on the ride to town, Savannah told me years later. Had it all worked out. "I need a cook. My sister Sarah's visiting from Denver, and she's the first to admit she can't boil water without burning it. The ranch hands are too polite to complain, but I've seen them sneaking extra biscuits at breakfast because they know dinner's going to be rough." Despite everything, Savannah's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "You're offering me employment," she said. "Room, board, and fair wages," Quentin confirmed. "Sarah will be there for propriety. You'd have your own space in the cabin, and if it doesn't suit you, if you feel uncomfortable or want to make other arrangements, I'll help you do that. No obligations." Savannah looked down at Emma. The baby was sleeping now, her little mouth slightly open, peaceful, trusting. "Why?" Savannah asked. She looked back up at Quentin. "Why would you do this for a complete stranger?" And that's when Quentin said something that Savannah remembered for the rest of her life. "Because my mother raised me too," he said simply, "and because every child deserves a safe place to sleep. Every mother deserves a chance to provide for her child." The words hung in the air, true as gospel, simple as breathing. Savannah studied his face for a long moment. Then she turned to the sheriff. "Sheriff Morgan, in your professional opinion, is Mr. Ross a man of good character?" The sheriff didn't hesitate. "Best man I know, ma'am. You and your daughter would be safe at the Double R. I'd stake my badge on it." Savannah took a deep breath, let it out slow. "Then I accept, Mr. Ross, with gratitude, and I promise you won't regret it." "I know I won't," Quentin said, and he was right about that, though it took a while before either of them understood just how right. The ride out to the Double R took about 40 minutes. For the first 10 minutes, they didn't talk much. Savannah held Emma, who'd woken up and was looking around with wide eyes. The baby had never seen country like this, neither had her mother. The landscape opened up as they left town, rolling grassland stretching to the horizon, sky so big and blue it hurt to look at, heat shimmering off the earth in waves. Savannah caught her breath at one point. Quentin noticed. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" he said. "First time?" "Yes," she admitted. "In Boston everything is contained. Buildings and streets and walls. This is endless," Quentin finished. "First time I saw it, I thought it was the loneliest place on earth. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "When did you come here?" Savannah asked. "Right after the war. I was 15. My father wanted a fresh start, somewhere we could build something of our own." "And your mother?" Savannah asked, then quickly added, "Forgive me, I don't mean to pry." "It's all right," Quentin said. "She passed 5 years ago, consumption." "I'm sorry." They rode in silence for a bit. Then Quentin spoke again. "Can I tell you something? About my mother?" Savannah nodded. And this is where the story gets important. This is where you understand why Quentin did what he did. I was 10 years old, Quentin said, his eyes on the horizon. We were still living in Missouri then, before the war. My father worked as a blacksmith. We didn't have much, but we got by. He paused, gathering the memory. One winter morning, a young woman came to our door. She was maybe 17, pregnant, alone. Her family had thrown her out when they discovered her condition. The man who'd gotten her that way had disappeared. Savannah went very still beside him. My mother took one look at her and pulled her inside. No questions, no judgment. Just come in, child, you're freezing. Quentin's voice got softer, remembering. That woman stayed with us for 4 months. The whole town turned against my mother for it, called her names, said she was encouraging sin. Some of my father's customers took their business elsewhere. But she didn't send the woman away. Never even considered it, Quentin said. I asked her once why she did it, why she helped when it cost us so much. You know what she said? Savannah shook her head. She said, Quentin, that girl made a mistake, but the baby didn't, and neither did I. The only mistake would be turning them away when I have the means to help. Then she looked at me, real serious, and said, when you're grown and someone comes to you in need, especially a woman or child, you help them. No questions, no judgment. That's how we stay human in a hard world. He was quiet for a moment. She made me promise, right there in the kitchen. Made me swear I'd always help folks who had nowhere else to turn. And you kept the promise, Savannah said softly. Trying to, Quentin said. Though I'll admit, this is the first time I've really had the chance. We're pretty isolated out at the ranch. Savannah looked down at Emma, who was reaching for the brim of her bonnet. What happened to the woman? She asked. The one your mother helped? She had a healthy baby boy. Stayed with us until she was strong enough to travel, then went to live with relatives out west. She wrote to my mother for years after, sent her pictures of the boy growing up. Last letter came about a year before Mama died. The boy was doing well, learning to read, had a good life. Quentin glanced at Savannah. So you see, Miss Mitchell, I'm not being noble. I'm just keeping a promise to a woman who taught me everything worth knowing about being human. Savannah's eyes were bright with tears that didn't fall. Your mother sounds like she was remarkable, she said. She was, Quentin agreed. I hope I'm half the person she was. They rode in silence after that. But it was a different kind of silence, more comfortable, like something had been shared that mattered. Now, I need to tell you what I was doing while all this was happening. I was at the ranch, working with Pete to break a new mare to saddle. Stubborn creature, that horse. Took us most of the afternoon. We were in the corral when we heard the wagon coming. Pete looked up, shaded his eyes. That's Quentin, he said. Wasn't expecting him back so soon. Then we saw he wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him, and she was holding a baby. Pete and I looked at each other. Neither of us said anything, but we were both thinking the same thing. This had something to do with that mail-order bride. Had to be. The wagon pulled up to the main house. Quentin hopped down, came around to help the woman down. Real gentle, like she might break. That's when Sarah came out of the house. Sarah Ross was 27 then. Pretty woman, smart as a whip. She'd been teaching school in Denver for 5 years, came home every few months to visit her brother. She was wearing a simple cotton dress, flour on her hands from attempting to make bread. She took one look at Quentin, then at the woman with the baby, and I saw her face change. Surprise, then understanding, then something else. Approval, maybe. Sarah? Quentin called. This is Miss Savannah Mitchell and her daughter Emma. They're going to be staying in the foreman's cabin. Miss Mitchell's going to help with the cooking while you're visiting. Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and came down the porch steps, smiling warm as summer sunshine. Thank goodness, she said, reaching for Savannah's hand. I'm Sarah Ross, Quentin's sister, and I'm a terrible cook, absolutely dreadful. You're saving the men from certain starvation. Despite everything, Savannah smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. I'm pleased to meet you, she said, though I'm sure you're not as bad as all that. Oh, I am, Sarah assured her. Ask anyone. Last week I burned soup. I didn't think that was possible, but I managed it." That got a small laugh from Savannah. First one, I imagine, since she'd stepped off that train. "Come on," Sarah said, linking her arm through Savannah's like they were old friends. "Let me show you the cabin. It's small, but I aired it out last week, and it's quite comfortable." The two women walked off toward the cabin, Sarah chattering away about the ranch and the hands and how glad she was to have another woman around. Quentin watched them go. Then he turned and saw Pete and me standing by the corral, probably staring like a couple of fools. "Something you boys need?" he asked, but he was smiling. "No, sir," Pete said, "just admiring the new arrival." "Her name's Savannah Mitchell," Quentin said. "She's going to be working here. I expect you to treat her with respect." "Goes without saying," Pete replied. And it did. Pete was old-fashioned that way. A woman deserved courtesy, period. Didn't matter who she was or where she came from. Later, after Quentin went to help Savannah with her trunk, Pete turned to me. "That take courage," he said quietly, "bringing her here. Town's going to talk." "Let them talk," I said. "All 18 years of ignorant bravado. What do we care?" Pete looked at me with those old eyes that had seen too much war. "You'll learn, boy," he said. "Sometimes talk is worse than bullets. Bullets only kill you once." I didn't understand then, but I would. The foreman's cabin was simple but solid. One main room with a table, 2 chairs, and a small sofa. A kitchen area in one corner with a cast-iron stove and shelves for provisions. A door leading to a bedroom with a bed, a chest of drawers, and something that made Savannah catch her breath. A crib. "That was Quentin's and mine when we were babies," Sarah said, running her hand along the wooden rail. "Our father built it, said he wanted it to last generations. It's been sitting in storage for years. When Quentin asked me to prepare the cabin this morning, I thought Emma might use it." Savannah stood very still, looking at the crib, at this kindness from strangers. "This morning?" she asked. "He asked you this morning?" Sarah nodded. "Rode out before dawn. Said he had a feeling someone might need help today. Asked me to make the cabin ready, just in case." Savannah's hand went to her mouth. The tears she'd been holding back since the train station finally came. Not sobs, just silent tears running down her face. Sarah put her arm around Savannah's shoulders. "It's all right," she said softly. "You're safe here, both of you." "I don't understand," Savannah whispered. "Why is he doing this? What does he want from me?" "Nothing," Sarah said firmly. "Quentin's not that kind of man. He helps because it's right, because our mother taught him to, that's all." Savannah shook her head. "People don't just help, not without expecting something in return." Sarah's expression turned sad, knowing. "Someone hurt you bad, didn't they?" she said quietly. "Made you think kindness always has a price." Savannah looked away. "I'd rather not discuss it." "Fair enough," Sarah said. "But let me tell you something about my brother. He's the best man I know. If he says you're safe here, you are. If he says there's no strings, there aren't. He keeps his word, Miss Mitchell, always." She paused, then added, "Give us a chance. Give yourself a chance. You don't have to trust right away. Just don't run until you've seen what we're offering is real." Savannah nodded slowly, set Emma in the crib, watched her daughter reach for a wooden mobile hanging above, little carved animals spinning slowly in the breeze from the window. "Thank you," she said. "Both of you. I don't know how I'll ever repay this kindness." "You'll repay it by making dinner that doesn't taste like boot leather," Sarah said. And there was that warm smile again. "That'll be payment enough." That first evening, Savannah cooked dinner for the household. Nothing fancy, just beef stew, biscuits, and dried apple pie. But it was the best food we'd had in weeks. Sarah had insisted Savannah eat with them in the main house instead of alone in the cabin. "We're not formal here," she'd said, "and I want the company." So there we all were, Quentin at the head of the table, Sarah to his right, Savannah to his left, and Emma in a basket on the floor, sleeping peaceful as an angel. I was eating with the hands in the bunkhouse, but Quentin told me about that dinner later. Told me how Savannah had been quiet at first, just listening to Sarah chatter about Denver and the school where she taught. But then Sarah asked about Boston, and Savannah started to open up, just a little. Talking about the harbor, the cobblestone streets, the way autumn looked when the leaves turned in the common. "You miss it," Sarah observed. Savannah was quiet for a moment. "I miss what it was, before everything changed." Neither Quentin nor Sarah pressed her on that. They understood. Everyone has a before. That time when life was different, easier maybe, or at least more innocent. After dinner, Savannah insisted on cleaning up. Sarah tried to help, but Savannah shooed her away. "You've done enough," she said. "Let me earn my keep." Quentin walked Sarah back to the main house, then returned to the kitchen where Savannah was washing dishes. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "I want you to know you can leave whenever you want. If you feel uncomfortable, or if you want to make other arrangements, just say the word." Savannah turned from the sink. Her hands were wet, her sleeves rolled up. She looked tired, but not defeated. "Mr. Ross," she said, "I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me honestly." "All right. Why are you really doing this? And please don't tell me it's just because your mother raised you to help people. There's more to it than that." Quentin considered this, then he nodded. "You're right, there is more." He pulled out a chair, sat down, gestured for her to do the same. "I saw Harold Whitcomb leave you at that station," he said. "Saw him run like the coward he is. And I got angry, angrier than I've been in a long time." He looked at his hands. "See, I know what it's like to lose someone you love, to have life take away something precious. My fiancée died 3 years ago in a flash flood. I couldn't save her, couldn't do anything but watch and feel helpless." Savannah's expression softened. "I'm sorry. Point is," Quentin continued, "I couldn't save Lucinda, but I could help you, and maybe that's selfish. Maybe I'm doing this as much for me as for you, to prove to myself I'm not completely useless when someone needs help." He met her eyes. "So that's the truth. I'm helping you because my mother taught me to, but also because I need to feel like I can still do some good in the world. Is that honest enough?" Savannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's honest." She went back to the dishes. Quentin stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Miss Mitchell?" "Yes?" "You don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not loyalty, nothing. You work for your keep, and that makes us even. Understand?" "I understand," she said. But as Quentin walked back to the main house under a sky full of stars, he wondered if that was true, if they'd ever really be even. Something had shifted that day. Something had started that couldn't be stopped. He just didn't know it yet. Savannah didn't sleep much that first night. She lay in the bed, the first real bed she'd had in months, and stared at the ceiling. Emma was asleep in the crib, making small baby sounds, content, safe. But Savannah's mind wouldn't quiet. She kept thinking about the last time a man had offered to help her, the last time someone had made promises. His name had been Thomas Whitmore, son of her mother's employer, handsome, charming, educated. Everything a young woman working as a maid could hope to notice her. And he had noticed her. Lord, how he'd noticed her. "You're too beautiful to be scrubbing floors," he'd said one autumn evening when he caught her cleaning the library. She'd been flattered, foolish, 17 years old and her mother barely cold in the ground. He'd courted her in secret, stolen moments in the garden, letters left in hiding places, promises whispered in the dark. "I'll marry you," he'd said, "once I finish my studies, once my parents accept that I've chosen my own path. We'll go somewhere new, start fresh." She'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed every word. When she told him about the baby, his face had changed, gone cold as January frost. "You're lying," he'd said. "This is some scheme to trap me." "Thomas, I would never. My parents will hear about this. They'll know you're trying to ruin me." And they had heard. His version, naturally. The scheming maid trying to entrap their innocent son with false claims of pregnancy. She'd been dismissed without a reference, without even her final wages. The boarding house had taken her in only because the landlady remembered her mother. had let her work in the kitchen where the guests wouldn't see her condition, where she could pretend she didn't exist. After Emma was born, the landlady had helped her find the mail-order bride opportunity. "It's your only chance," she'd said kindly but firmly. "A fresh start, a new life. Take it." So Savannah had written to Harold Whitcomb, had lied about Emma being her orphaned niece, had traveled 2,000 miles on the promise of a man she'd never met. And here she was, in another stranger's house, dependent on another man's charity. Savannah turned on her side, looked at Emma sleeping in the moonlight. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she whispered. "Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do." Emma slept on, innocent and trusting, and Savannah promised herself she'd be smarter this time, more careful. She'd work hard, save money, and as soon as she could, she'd find somewhere else to go, somewhere she didn't have to depend on anyone's kindness. Because kindness always ran out eventually. At least, that's what she believed. She didn't know yet that she was wrong, that some people's kindness ran deeper than promises, deeper than words. But she'd learn. The next morning, Savannah woke before dawn, old habits from the boarding house. She fed Emma, changed her, then headed to the main house kitchen to start breakfast. She found Sarah already there, or rather, attempting to be there. The woman was staring at the stove like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "Oh, thank goodness," Sarah said when Savannah entered. "I was trying to figure out how to light this thing without burning down the house." Despite herself, Savannah smiled. "Let me show you." They worked together, Savannah cooking while Sarah watched and tried to help. The kitchen filled with the smell of coffee, bacon, and fresh biscuits. When Quentin came in for breakfast, he stopped in the doorway, took in the scene. His sister and Savannah working side by side, laughing about something. Emma in her basket on the table, watching everything with wide eyes. Something in his chest loosened, something that had been tight for 3 years. This was what a home should feel like, he thought, full of life and laughter and the smell of good food. This was what he'd been missing. Later that morning, Sarah convinced Savannah to come to town for supplies. "You'll need a few things for the cabin," Sarah said, "and Emma could use some new clothes. She's growing like a weed." Savannah was reluctant, but Sarah was persistent. And, truthfully, Savannah did need some things. So they took the wagon to town, Emma bundled in Savannah's arms. The moment they stepped into Miller's General Store, the conversation stopped. Every eye in the place turned to look at them, at Savannah specifically, at the baby in her arms. Mrs. Caldwell, the dressmaker, smiled kindly. "Good morning, Miss Ross. And you must be Miss Mitchell. Welcome to Willow Creek." But before Savannah could respond, another voice cut through the store. "Well, well, so this is Harold Whitcomb's mail-order bride." Mrs. Peaton stood by the fabric counter, her expression cold as December. "I'm surprised to see you're still in town, Miss Mitchell," she continued. "I would have thought you'd go back where you came from." The store went dead silent, waiting to see what would happen. Savannah could have apologized, could have made herself small, could have explained or justified or begged for understanding. Instead, she straightened her spine, looked Mrs. Peaton directly in the eye. "No, ma'am," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I won't be going back. I'm staying right here in Willow Creek, working at the Double R Ranch." Mrs. Peaton's eyebrow arched. How convenient for Mr. Ross. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Savannah felt her face flush, but she didn't look away. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "Very convenient. He needed a cook, I needed employment. It's a practical arrangement that benefits us both." She shifted Emma in her arms. "As for where I came from, you're right to be curious. I came from Boston. I'm unmarried. I have a daughter, and I'm not ashamed of any of that." Mrs. Peaton looked stunned. Apparently, she'd expected tears or denials. Savannah continued, her voice strong. "I made choices. Some were mistakes. But Emma isn't a mistake. She's my daughter, and I love her. If you find that shameful, Mrs. Peaton, that says more about your character than mine." The silence in the store was absolute. Then Mrs. Caldwell started clapping, slow at first, then genuine. "Well said, Miss Mitchell," she said warmly. "Well said indeed." A few other women in the store nodded. Not everyone, but some. Mrs. Peaton's face had gone red. She gathered her purchases and swept out of the store without another word. Sarah touched Savannah's arm, gently. "You all right?" Savannah was shaking, but her voice stayed steady. "Yes, I'm fine." And she was. She'd stood her ground. She'd refused to be ashamed. But as they finished their shopping and headed back to the wagon, Savannah saw the looks, heard the whispers starting. The battle had only just begun. That evening, after Emma was asleep and dinner was finished, Savannah sat on the small porch of the foreman's cabin. Quentin found her there. He'd heard about the incident in town. News traveled fast. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She gestured to the chair beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun paint the sky orange and pink. "Sarah told me what happened at the store," Quentin said finally, "with Mrs. Peaton." "I'm sorry if I've caused you embarrassment," Savannah said. "I should have kept quiet." "What?" "No." Quentin turned to look at her. "You stood up for yourself, for Emma. I'm proud of you." Savannah looked at him, surprised. "You don't owe Mrs. Peaton or anyone else an apology for existing," Quentin continued. "You're a woman who's working to provide for her child. There's no shame in that. The town doesn't see it that way." "Some of the town doesn't see it that way," Quentin corrected, "but some does. You heard Mrs. Caldwell. Others will come around." "And if they don't?" Quentin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Then they don't. But you've got a place here as long as you want it. The town can think what it likes." Savannah felt tears prick her eyes again. This man, this stranger who kept offering kindness with no strings attached. "Why aren't you married, Mr. Ross?" she asked suddenly. "A man like you should have a wife, a family." He looked away toward the horizon. "I was going to be," he said quietly. "Lucinda and I were engaged, had the wedding all planned. What happened? Flash flood in the spring of '72. She was crossing Miller's Creek on her way to town. The water rose too fast. Her horse made it out, but she didn't." His voice was flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they've told a story too many times. "They found her body 2 days later, caught in some branches downstream." "I'm so sorry," Savannah whispered. "For a long time after, I couldn't see the point in anything," Quentin continued. "Just worked myself into the ground every day so I'd be too tired to think." He paused. "But time passes. Life keeps going whether you want it to or not. And eventually, I realized Lucinda would have hated seeing me waste my life in grief." He looked at Savannah. "She had the kindest heart of anyone I ever knew. Would have loved helping you and Emma. Would have insisted on it, actually." Savannah didn't know what to say to that. They sat in silence as the stars started to appear, one by one, then dozens, then hundreds, more stars than Savannah had ever seen in her life. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Quentin agreed. "Harsh sometimes, unforgiving, but beautiful." He stood to leave, then paused. "Miss Mitchell, I want you to know something. What you did today in town, standing up to Mrs. Peaton, that took real courage. You're stronger than you think." "Or more foolish," she said. "Sometimes courage and foolishness look the same," he said with a small smile. "The difference is the outcome, and I think yours is going to be just fine." He tipped his hat and headed back to the main house. Savannah sat there alone for a while longer, thinking about courage and kindness and the strange turn her life had taken. She'd come west expecting one thing and found something entirely different. She didn't trust it yet, didn't trust him, didn't trust any of this. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn to. I'll tell you this, and I knew it even then, young as I was. That afternoon in the store, when Savannah stood up to Mrs. Peaton, something changed in Willow Creek. Lines got drawn. Sides got chosen. Some folks thought Savannah was brave. Others thought she was brazen. And some, like Mrs. Peaton, thought she was dangerous. A woman who wouldn't be ashamed, who wouldn't apologize for her existence, who stood tall when she was supposed to bow down. That kind of woman was a threat. And threats, well, they have a way of bringing out the worst in people. Storm was coming. We could all feel it, not the kind with rain and thunder. The kind that happens when people decide they're going to make someone pay for being different. Savannah had drawn her line in the sand. Now we'd see who crossed it, and who stood beside her when they did. 3 weeks passed. You might think that's not long enough for a life to change, but out on the frontier, 3 weeks could be a lifetime. In 3 weeks, a drought could break or a ranch could go under. A man could strike gold or lose everything. A woman could go from stranger to family. That's what happened with Savannah. She didn't mean for it to happen. Tried to keep her distance, actually. Told herself she was just working for wages, nothing more. That she'd save her money and move on as soon as she could. But the ranch had other ideas. Every morning, Savannah woke before dawn to cook breakfast. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, gravy. Good, honest food that stuck to a man's ribs. The ranch hands started showing up earlier and earlier just to be in the kitchen when she was cooking. Not bothering her. Pete would have skinned them alive if they'd been disrespectful. Just being there. Enjoying the smell of real food and the sound of a woman humming while she worked. One morning, old Jake Miller, he was about 50, weathered as saddle leather, brought her wildflowers he'd picked on the range. "Just thought they might brighten up the cabin, ma'am," he said, twisting his hat in his hands like a schoolboy. After that, there were flowers every few days. Different hands bringing them. Nobody making a big show of it. Just small kindnesses. Sarah noticed. Told me about it later. "They've adopted her," she said, laughing. "The whole crew, like she's their collective little sister or daughter or something." "Pete especially," I said. And it was true. Pete had taken to teaching Savannah about ranch life. How to read weather in the sky. Which plants were good for medicine. How to spot a horse going lame before it got serious. "A woman out here needs to know things," he'd say gruffly. "Can't rely on men being around all the time." But I think it was more than that. I think Pete saw something of himself in Savannah. Both of them carrying shame that wasn't entirely theirs. Both of them trying to prove they were more than their worst moments. Then there was the riding lesson. Quentin had mentioned it casually one evening. "You should learn to ride. Out here you never know when you might need to." Savannah had been reluctant. "I'm from Boston, Mr. Ross. We had carriages." "And if there's an emergency? If Emma gets sick and you need to get to town?" That got her attention. Anything involving Emma's safety, Savannah took seriously. So one cool September afternoon, Quentin saddled up Daisy, the gentlest mare on the ranch, and led Savannah to the corral. I was mending fence nearby, close enough to watch without being obvious. "First thing," Quentin said, "is don't be scared. Daisy can smell fear, and it makes her nervous." "That's not helpful," Savannah said. "I am scared." Quentin smiled. "Then pretend you're not. Fake it till it's real." He showed her how to approach the horse, how to touch her neck, let her get used to the scent. "Now," he said, "I'm going to help you mount. Put your foot in the stirrup, yes, like that, and I'll lift you." His hands went to her waist. Even from where I was standing, I could see both of them go still for a second. That moment when you touch someone and realize it means something. Then Quentin lifted her into the saddle. Smooth as anything. Savannah sat there, gripping the saddle horn with white knuckles. "I'm very high up," she said. "You're fine," Quentin said. "I've got the reins. Daisy's not going anywhere." He led the horse around the corral, slow circles, talking the whole time in that low, calm voice of his. "Relax your shoulders. Let your hips move with her gait. That's it. You're doing great." After about 10 minutes, Savannah started to relax, started to smile even. "I'm riding," she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "You are," Quentin confirmed. "It's not as terrifying as I thought. Most things aren't." They went around a few more times. Then Daisy stumbled slightly. Nothing serious, just a rock under her hoof. But Savannah lost her balance. She started to slide sideways, made a small sound of alarm. Quentin caught her, pulled her right off the horse and into his arms. They stood there for a moment, her hands on his shoulders, his arms around her waist, both of them breathing hard. "I've got you," he said quietly. "I see that," she said. Their faces were close, very close. Then Emma started crying from her basket under the tree where Sarah was watching her, and the moment broke. Quentin set Savannah on her feet, stepped back, cleared his throat. "We'll try again tomorrow," he said. "You did well." Savannah nodded, couldn't quite meet his eyes. "Thank you." She went to tend to Emma, and Quentin just stood there for a minute, looking at his hands like they'd done something unexpected. I went back to mending fence, pretending I hadn't seen anything, but I'd seen, and I knew. Something was growing between them, something neither of them had planned on. Emma was thriving. At 7 months old now, she was trying to crawl, pulling herself forward on her belly like a determined little caterpillar. She'd also decided that Quentin was the most fascinating person in the world. Whenever he came into a room, her whole face would light up. She'd reach for him with those chubby baby hands, making urgent little sounds until he picked her up. Savannah noticed. How could she not? One evening, she found Quentin sitting on the porch of the main house, Emma in his lap. He'd carved a little wooden horse for her, and she was gumming it happily, drool everywhere. "She's fond of you," Savannah said, sitting down beside them. "The feeling's mutual," Quentin said. He bounced Emma gently on his knee, and she giggled. "She's a good baby." "She's never taken to anyone like this," Savannah said quietly. "Not even people I knew in Boston. But with you?" "Maybe she knows I raised 2 younger sisters," Quentin said. "Knows I'm not going to drop her." "Maybe," Savannah said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Emma eventually fell asleep against Quentin's chest, the wooden horse still clutched in her tiny fist. "I should take her to bed," Savannah said. But she didn't move. Just sat there watching her daughter sleep peacefully in a near stranger's arms. "Savannah," Quentin said, and it was the first time he'd used her given name without the Miss Mitchell attached. She looked at him. "I know you're planning to leave," he said, "soon as you save enough money. I can see it in the way you never quite unpack everything, the way you keep a little distance." She started to protest, but he held up his hand. "I'm not asking you to stay forever," he said. "I'm just saying, there's no rush. This arrangement, it's working. For all of us." He looked down at Emma. "She's happy here. You're safe here. And he paused. "We like having you both." Savannah's throat felt tight. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "You're not a burden. He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "You're earning your keep and then some. The hands haven't eaten this well in years. Sarah's actually learning to cook by watching you. And Emma—" He looked at the sleeping baby. "Emma reminds us what we're working for, why we build things, why any of this matters." Savannah had to look away before he saw the tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. She took Emma from his arms, carefully, so as not to wake her, and carried her daughter to the cabin. But that night, lying in bed, she thought about what Quentin had said. There's no rush. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe she could stay a little longer. Let Emma have this safe, happy place for a while. Maybe she could let herself have it too. But the town had other ideas. Late September brought the first real consequences. Quentin went to order supplies at Miller's general store like he did every month. But this time, Mr. Miller looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Ross," he said, "I need to talk to you about your account." "Problem with payment?" Quentin asked. "I thought we were current." You are," Miller said quickly. "It's not that. He lowered his voice. "It's Mrs. Miller and some of the other ladies. They're saying that if I keep doing business with you, with the situation at your ranch, they'll take their trade elsewhere." Quentin went very still. "The situation." Miller had the grace to look ashamed. "Miss Mitchell, the baby, the fact that she's living on your property." "She's living in the foreman's cabin and working as my cook," Quentin said. His voice was quiet but hard as iron. "My sister is there as chaperone. Everything is proper and above board." I know," Miller said, "but folks talk. And Mrs. Peaton, she's been saying things about impropriety, about setting bad examples." "Mrs. Peaton should mind her own business." "I agree," Miller said, "but I can't afford to lose half my customers, Mr. Ross. I got a family to feed, too." Quentin stood there for a long moment. Then he nodded. I understand, he said, but business is business. I'll take my trade to the next town over. Mr. Ross, I don't want— It's fine, Miller. I said I understand. He walked out without another word. That evening he told Sarah what had happened, and Sarah, being Sarah, was furious. That's ridiculous, she said. You're running a ranch, not a brothel. Savannah's a respectable employee. Doesn't matter what's true, Quentin said. Matters what people believe. So what are you going to do? Quentin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, keep on like we are. Let them talk. Eventually they'll find something else to gossip about. But the next week brought more trouble. The bank, Mr. Peaton's bank, suddenly called in a note on some equipment Quentin had been paying off. Not illegal exactly, but unusual. The note wasn't due for another 6 months. Then the feed supplier in town said he couldn't extend credit anymore. Cash only from now on. Small things, inconvenient things, but they added up. Pete noticed. Pulled Quentin aside one day while we were working cattle. They're trying to squeeze you out, he said. Make it expensive to keep Miss Savannah around. Let them try, Quentin said. I'm not backing down. Might cost you, Pete warned. Some things are worth the cost. Then came the announcement about the harvest dance. Every year in October, the whole county gathered for the celebration. Music, food, dancing. Biggest social event of the season. Sarah was determined that Savannah should go. You can't hide in the ranch forever, she said one afternoon while they were shelling peas. You're a part of this community now, whether they like it or not. I don't think that's wise, Savannah said. After what happened at the store, especially after what happened at the store, Sarah countered. You stood up to Mrs. Peaton once. Now you need to show the whole town you're not ashamed, that you're here to stay. But I'm not here to stay, Savannah said. Not permanently. Sarah looked at her, really looked at her. Aren't you? She asked softly. Savannah opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. I need to tell you something, Sarah said, about Quentin. She set down her bowl of peas. After Lucinda died, he shut down. For 2 years, he was just empty, going through the motions. I was so worried about him. She paused. But since you've been here, he's different. He smiles again. Laughs. I heard him singing while he was working the other day. Singing, Savannah. He hasn't done that in 3 years. Sarah, I don't think— I'm not saying you owe him anything, Sarah interrupted gently. I'm just saying, whatever's happening here, it's good, for both of you. Don't run from it just because you're scared. Savannah looked down at her hands. What if I'm not what he needs? What if I'm just convenient? Then you're not giving my brother enough credit, Sarah said. Quentin Ross doesn't do convenient, he does right. And if he's making room for you in his life, it's because he wants you there, not because you're filling a gap. She touched Savannah's hand. Come to the dance. Hold your head high. Show them you belong. After a long moment, Savannah nodded. All right, she said. I'll go. Mrs. Caldwell was delighted to make Savannah a dress for the dance. Something special, she said, pulling out bolts of fabric. Something that says you're not apologizing for existing. They settled on deep green cotton with black piping. Simple but elegant. The kind of dress that wouldn't look out of place in Boston but suited Texas just fine. While Mrs. Caldwell took measurements, her assistant, a young woman named Martha, worked nearby. There are more of us than you might think, Martha said quietly, not looking up from her sewing. Savannah turned. I'm sorry? Martha glanced at Mrs. Caldwell, who nodded slightly. Women who understand your situation, Martha continued. My cousin in Austin. She had a baby without a husband, had to give him up for adoption. Broke her heart. She finally looked at Savannah. What you did, keeping your daughter, fighting to provide for her, that took courage. Some of us see that. Not everyone does, Savannah said. No, Mrs. Caldwell agreed. Not everyone, but more than you think. We're just quieter about it. The ones who judge, they're louder. She pinned the hem, stood back to assess. There's been talk, she said, about making things difficult for Mr. Ross, trying to force him to let you go. Savannah's stomach dropped. I didn't want to cause him trouble. "You're not causing it," Mrs. Caldwell said firmly. "Mrs. Peaton and her ilk are causing it. There's a difference." "Why does she hate me so much?" Savannah asked. "I've never even met her before that day in the store." Mrs. Caldwell and Martha exchanged glances. "That's not my story to tell," Mrs. Caldwell said finally. "But I will say this. Sometimes the harshest judges are the ones carrying the heaviest guilt." The night of the harvest dance arrived clear and cool. Savannah wore her green dress. Sarah had helped her with her hair, pinning it up in a style that was fashionable but not too elaborate. Emma stayed with Mrs. Torres, the ranch cook's wife, who'd offered to watch her for the evening. "You go," she'd said in her warm, accented English. "Have fun. Emma will be fine with me." When Savannah walked out of the cabin, Quentin was waiting by the wagon. He went very still when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said. It wasn't a line, wasn't flattery, just a statement of fact said with such sincerity that Savannah felt herself blush. "Thank you," she said. "You clean up well yourself." He was wearing his Sunday suit, black, well-fitted. Made him look less like a rancher and more like the educated man he actually was. The ride to town was quiet, comfortable. Sarah chattered from the back of the wagon about who would be there and what the music would be like. But Savannah's stomach was tight with nerves. When they arrived at the town hall, it was already crowded. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light. A small band was setting up in the corner. Tables along one wall held enough food to feed an army. The moment Savannah walked in with Quentin and Sarah, conversations paused. Every eye in the room turned to look. Sarah linked her arm through Savannah's. "Hold your head high," she whispered. They made their way to a table. Several people greeted them warmly. Mrs. Caldwell, the sheriff, some of the other ranchers Quentin did business with. But others turned away, made a point of not acknowledging them, and Mrs. Peaton, standing with a group of well-dressed women, watched Savannah with cold eyes. The dancing started. Quentin led Savannah onto the floor for the first waltz. His hand at her waist, hers on his shoulder, proper and respectful, but there was something else underneath, an awareness of each other that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. "You're doing fine," he said quietly as they turned. "People are staring. Let them stare. Quentin, I don't want to make things harder for you." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "You're not making anything hard. You're making it better." The music swirled around them. Other couples danced nearby, but Savannah barely noticed. "How can you say that?" she asked. "You're losing business. The bank's pressuring you, all because I'm at the ranch." "All because some people can't mind their own affairs," he corrected. "That's not on you, Savannah. That's on them." The song ended. They stood there for a moment, hands still clasped. Then Sarah appeared with a young man in tow. "Savannah, this is Dr. Matthews. He's new in town, just moved from San Antonio. Dr. Miss Savannah Mitchell." The young doctor bowed slightly. "Would you honor me with the next dance, Miss Mitchell?" Savannah glanced at Quentin, who nodded and stepped back. Dr. Matthews was polite and proper, made pleasant conversation about the weather and the town while they danced. But when he asked about her situation, Savannah felt herself tense. "I understand you work at the Double R," he said. "Yes, as a cook." "And you have a child?" "I do. A daughter." "Must be difficult," he said. "Being alone with a baby, no husband to provide for you." There was something in his tone, not quite judgment, but not quite acceptance either. "I provide for myself," Savannah said coolly, "and my daughter and I are doing just fine." Of course," he said quickly. "I just meant, well, if you ever need medical care for the child, I'm happy to help, at a reduced rate given your circumstances." "My circumstances are that I'm employed at a respectable ranch," Savannah said. "I can pay standard rates, doctor." The song ended. She curtsied politely and walked away. When she returned to where Sarah and Quentin were standing, she was trembling slightly. "You all right?" Quentin asked. "Fine," she said. "Just tired of being treated like a charity case." Later in the evening, Savannah stepped outside for air. The night was beautiful, cool and clear, Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. She was standing on the church steps when a voice spoke behind her. "Miss Mitchell?" She turned. Mrs. Peaton stood there, alone. Her face was different than Savannah had ever seen it, not harsh, not cold, sad. "Mrs. Peaton," Savannah said cautiously. "I owe you an apology," Mrs. Peaton said. Her voice was quiet, controlled, like she was forcing each word out. Savannah didn't know what to say. "I've been cruel to you," Mrs. Peaton continued, "unnecessarily so, and I need to tell you why." She took a breath. 23 years ago I was 17 years old, unmarried, and pregnant. Savannah's breath caught. My family sent me away, to relatives in St. Louis. I gave birth to a daughter, a beautiful baby girl with dark hair and blue eyes. Mrs. Peaton's voice cracked slightly. "They took her from me, before I even held her, told me she'd be adopted by a good family, that I'd never see her again, and I never did." Tears were running down her face now. "I came back 6 months later, married Richard within the year. We tried to have children, couldn't. And every time I saw a young mother with a baby, it was like a knife to the heart." She looked at Savannah directly. "But you kept your daughter. You fought for her. You did what I was too weak to do, and I hated you for that. Hated your courage because it showed me my cowardice." Savannah felt her own eyes filling with tears. "Mrs. Peaton," she started, "you were 17. You didn't have a choice." "No," Mrs. Peaton agreed, "but you were only a few years older, and you found a way. That's the difference." She pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve, dabbed at her eyes. "I've been making your life difficult, turning people against you, against Mr. Ross, and I'm ashamed of it." "Why are you telling me this?" Savannah asked gently. "Because I want to stop," Mrs. Peaton said. "I want to help instead of hurt. When you open your home for women in need, and I believe you will someday, I want to be part of it. I want to do for others what no one did for me." Savannah didn't know what to say. This woman who'd been her harshest critic, revealing wounds so deep they'd never fully healed. "I forgive you," Savannah said finally, "and I would be honored to have your help. When the time comes." Mrs. Peaton nodded, composed herself. "Thank you," she said. "That's more grace than I deserve." She turned to go back inside, then paused. "Miss Mitchell? That young man who danced with you earlier, Dr. Matthews. He's a gossip. Whatever you told him, the whole town will know by morning." "I told him nothing that isn't already known," Savannah said. "Good, because there are people in this town who'd use any excuse to hurt you, to hurt Mr. Ross." She paused. "Be careful. Not everyone's had the revelation I've had." Then she went back inside, leaving Savannah alone under the stars. The ride home was quiet. Sarah had fallen asleep in the back of the wagon, exhausted from dancing. Quentin and Savannah sat side by side on the bench, not talking, just being. "Thank you for tonight," Savannah said finally. "For what?" "For not hiding me away, for letting me come, for standing beside me when people stared." Quentin was quiet for a moment. "Savannah," he said, "I need to tell you something." Her heart started beating faster. "What happened at the dance tonight? People watching us, whispering. That's not going to stop. If anything, it might get worse." "I know. And the business pressure, the social consequences, those might get worse too. I know that as well." He pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to look at her. "If you want to leave, I'll help you. I'll give you letters of recommendation, enough money to get wherever you want to go, whatever you need." Savannah felt her throat tighten. "But if you want to stay," he continued, "I want you to know I'm with you, all the way. Whatever comes, you're not facing it alone." "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk everything for me?" He looked at her for a long moment, the moonlight on his face, sincere and true. "Because I told myself I was helping you for my mother's sake," he said slowly. "But that's not the whole truth anymore." He paused. "I enjoy your company, Savannah. I look forward to evenings when we talk. I like hearing Emma laugh. I like the way the ranch feels alive again with you both there." Another pause. "I'm not asking for anything, not making promises I can't keep. I'm just telling you the truth. You're not just my employee anymore. You're—" He trailed off. "I'm what?" Savannah whispered. "Important to me," he finished. "You and Emma both. And I won't let this town run you off if you don't want to go." Savannah felt tears threatening again. This man, this good, honest man. "I don't want to go," she said. "But Quentin, there's still so much you don't know about me, about Emma's father, about why I really came west." "Then tell me," he said. "When you're ready. I'm not going anywhere." They looked at each other in the moonlight, and for the first time since she'd arrived in Texas, Savannah let herself hope. The next morning, everything changed. I was the one who saw the rider coming, some young courier from town pushing his horse hard. "Message for Miss Mitchell," he called. "Telegram from California." Savannah came out of the main house, wiping her hands on her apron, Quentin right behind her. She took the telegram with shaking hands. I watched her face go white as she read it. "What is it?" Quentin asked. She looked up at him, then at the courier, then back at the paper in her hands. "It's from an attorney in San Francisco," she said, her voice strange, distant. "About Harold Whitcomb." "What about him?" Sarah had appeared on the porch. Savannah's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the telegram. "He's dead," she said. "Harold Whitcomb is dead, and he left me something in his will." The word hung in the morning air. Dead. And left her something. I didn't understand then what it meant, why Savannah looked so terrified instead of relieved. But I'd learned soon enough. Harold Whitcomb was about to reach out from the grave and test everything that Savannah and Quentin had built. I'll tell you this, and I'm getting ahead of myself, I know, but that telegram was the beginning of the real test. Not town gossip, not business pressure, not even Mrs. Peyton's social campaign. The real test was whether Savannah could trust that good things didn't always come with hidden costs. Whether Quentin could prove that his love, and yes, it was love by then, even if he hadn't said it, was strong enough to weather the truth. Because Savannah was about to have options, real options. And Quentin was about to find out if she'd choose him when she didn't have to. The storm wasn't just coming, it was here. The attorney's letter arrived 3 days after the telegram. Detailed, legal, cold as winter stone. Harold Whitcomb, deceased in San Francisco from fever. No wife, no children. And in his will, he'd left his property in Willow Creek to Miss Savannah Mitchell in recompense for promises broken. 20 acres of land just outside town, a small house, and a bank account with $300. It was more money than Savannah had ever seen in her life. Sheriff Morgan read the letter aloud in his office while Savannah, Quentin, and Sarah listened. "The property's yours, free and clear," the sheriff said, "soon as you sign the papers." Savannah sat very still, Emma in her lap, quiet like she sensed something important was happening. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why would he leave me anything? He abandoned me." "Guilt, maybe," the sheriff suggested, "trying to make amends." "A bit late for that," Sarah said sharply. Quentin hadn't said anything, just stood by the window looking out at the street. Savannah glanced at him. His face was unreadable. "What should I do?" she asked. "Take it," the sheriff said. "It's yours by right. You could sell the property if you don't want it. $300 and 20 acres would fetch a good price. Enough to go anywhere. Start fresh." The words hung in the air. Enough to go anywhere. Savannah looked down at Emma, then at Quentin's back, still turned away, still silent. "Can I have some time to think about it?" she asked. "Of course," the sheriff said. "No rush." But there was a rush, as it turned out. News traveled fast in Willow Creek. By that evening, everyone knew that the mail-order bride had inherited property and money, and the talk started. I heard it myself in town the next day. Couldn't avoid it. "Convenient, isn't it?" one woman was saying in the general store. "She comes west for a husband, gets abandoned, and ends up with property anyway." "Makes you wonder if she planned it all along," another added. Mrs. Caldwell tried to shut them down. "That's ridiculous. The man died in California. She had nothing to do with it." But the seed was planted. By the time I got back to the ranch, The story had grown. Some folks were saying Savannah had known about the inheritance all along, that she'd trapped Whitcomb somehow, that she'd played on Quentin's kindness to have a place to stay while she waited for her windfall. None of it was true, of course, but truth doesn't matter much when people want to believe the worst. That night, Quentin came to the cabin after dinner. Savannah was sitting on the porch, Emma asleep inside. She looked tired, worn down. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She gestured to the chair beside her. They sat in silence for a while, the familiar evening sounds around them, crickets, distant cattle, the wind in the cottonwoods. "I heard what people are saying in town," Quentin said finally. "I figured you would." "None of it's true. I know that. You know that. But the town—" She trailed off. More silence. "Mister?" "Piton came by the ranch today," Quentin said, "from the bank. He suggested it might be easier for everyone if you moved to your new property, said it would stop the talk." Savannah went very still. "What did you say?" I told him where he could put his suggestion. Despite everything, Savannah smiled slightly. That must have been a conversation. It was brief. She looked at him, really looked at him, the strong profile, the weathered hands, the man who'd taken her in when no one else would. "Quentin," she said, "I need to know something, and I need you to be honest." "All right. Do you want me to leave, now that I have options? Now that I don't need your charity anymore, do you want me to go?" He turned to look at her, his blue eyes steady and sure. "God, no," he said. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think," she said. "You've been quiet since the telegram came. Distant. I thought maybe you were relieved, that you could finally be free of the burden I've caused." Quentin stood up, paced to the porch rail, stood there with his back to her. "Savannah," he said, "I've been quiet because I've been trying to figure out how to say something important." "What?" He turned around. "I don't want you to stay because you have to, because you need the work or the shelter. I want you to stay because you want to, because being here means something to you." He took a breath. "I've been scared that once you had choices, real choices, you'd realize you could do better than a lonely rancher in the middle of nowhere. That you'd take your daughter and go somewhere bigger, somewhere with more opportunity." Savannah stood up too, faced him. "And if I did leave?" she asked quietly. "What then?" "Then I'd help you pack," he said, "give you money for the journey, write you letters of recommendation, and wish you well." "And that's all?" He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said finally, "that's not all. I'd also spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't tell you the truth before you left." "What truth?" "That I'm falling in love with you," he said. "Simple as that. No poetry, no fancy words, just plain truth. That you and Emma have become the most important parts of my day. That when I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you in it." Savannah felt tears spring to her eyes. "But I also know," he continued, "that you've been hurt by men making promises, by being dependent on people who let you down. So I don't want you to stay because you feel obligated, or because you think you owe me something." He stepped closer. "I want you to be sure, to choose this, choose us, with clear eyes and a free heart." Savannah couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "So take your time," Quentin said. "Think about what you want. And whatever you decide, I'll support it." He touched her face gently, just once. Then he turned and walked back to the main house, leaving her alone under the stars. The next morning, Savannah made her decision. She told Sarah first. "I'm going to move to the property in town," she said, "just for a little while, to think, to be sure." Sarah's face fell. "Savannah, you don't have to—" "I do," Savannah interrupted gently. "Sarah, I need to know if what I'm feeling is real, or if it's just gratitude, dependence. I need to stand on my own 2 feet and see if I still choose this." Sarah understood. Didn't like it, but understood. "How long?" she asked. "I don't know. A few weeks, maybe." When Savannah told Quentin, he just nodded. "I'll help you move your things," he said. And he did. Loaded her trunk, Emma's crib, all her belongings into the wagon without complaint. Drove her to the small house that Whitcomb had owned. It was modest. 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was clean and solid. "I'll send Pete to check on you," Quentin said. "Make sure the roof doesn't leak, the stove works proper. Quentin, and if you need anything," he continued, "anything at all, you send word, you hear me?" "I hear you." They stood there in the yard, Emma in Savannah's arms, already fussing for Quentin. "This isn't goodbye," Savannah said. "I just need—" "I know," he said. "You need to be sure." He touched Emma's cheek. The baby grabbed his finger, held tight. "You take care of your mama," he told her. Then to Savannah, "You take care of each other." He climbed back in the wagon and drove away. Didn't look back. Because if he'd looked back, Savannah told me years later, she would have seen him crying. 2 weeks passed, the longest 2 weeks of both their lives. Savannah threw herself into fixing up the house, cleaning, painting, making it a home, trying to prove to herself she could do this alone. But every evening, when Emma would look at the door and make her little sounds, the ones she made when Quentin came home, Savannah's heart would break a little more. At the ranch, things weren't much better. The food went back to being terrible. Sarah tried, bless her heart, but she just didn't have the knack. And Quentin moved through his days like a ghost, working from before dawn till after dark, pushing himself until he was too exhausted to think. Pete noticed. Everyone noticed. "You could go see her," Pete said one evening. "Nothing wrong with visiting." "She needs space," Quentin said. "She needs to know you're still waiting," Pete countered. Big difference. But Quentin was stubborn. Savannah had asked for time, and he was going to give it to her, even if it killed him. Then came the storm, late October. The sky had been threatening all day, dark clouds rolling in from the west. That evening it hit. Thunder like cannons, lightning splitting the sky, rain coming down in sheets. And in her little house in town, Savannah woke to Emma screaming, not fussing, not crying, screaming. The baby's skin was burning hot. Her breathing was labored. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink. Savannah tried everything she knew. Cool cloths, rocking, singing. Nothing helped. By midnight she was terrified. She wrapped Emma in blankets, grabbed her cloak, and ran out into the storm. Dr. Matthews' house was 6 blocks away. She ran the whole way, Emma wailing in her arms. But the doctor wasn't home. His housekeeper said he'd been called to a ranch 20 miles out. Wouldn't be back until morning. "Is there anyone else?" Savannah asked desperately. "Not till Doc gets back, ma'am. I'm sorry." Savannah stood in the rain, Emma burning up in her arms, and she knew what she had to do. She didn't have a horse, didn't know how to ride well enough in a storm anyway, but the livery stable had a wagon. The owner took one look at the sick baby and handed over the reins. "You know the way to the Double R?" he asked. "Yes." "Then go, and be careful, road's going to be mud." The ride took 45 minutes that felt like 45 hours. The rain was blinding. The road was slick. Emma's cries were getting weaker, but Savannah drove on. When she finally saw the lights of the ranch house, she started shouting, "Quentin! Quentin, help!" The door flew open. Quentin ran out into the rain without even a coat. "Savannah? What?" Then he saw Emma. "Oh, God, bring her inside." They got Emma into the warm house. Sarah brought blankets. Pete appeared from somewhere with whiskey for rubbing on the baby's chest, but Emma was barely responsive now. Her fever was dangerously high. "We need the doctor," Sarah said. "He's 20 miles out," Savannah said. She was shaking, soaked through. "Won't be back until morning." Quentin looked at the baby. Then at the storm outside. "How far to Dr. Watson's place?" he asked Pete. 10 miles, but Quentin, in this storm—" "I know." Quentin was already moving, grabbing his coat and hat. "I'll be back with the doctor as soon as I can." "Quentin, it's too dangerous," Savannah said. "The roads—" He turned to her. "If it was my daughter, I'd ride through hell itself. Emma's no different." And before anyone could stop him, he was gone, out into the storm, into the night. For a baby who wasn't his blood but might as well have been. The hours that followed were the longest of Savannah's life. She held Emma, sponged her with cool water, whispered prayers she didn't know she remembered. Sarah sat with her, didn't say much, just was there, and Pete stood by the window, watching for Quentin to come back. "He'll make it," Pete said. "If anyone can, it's Quentin," but his voice was worried. Dawn was just breaking when they finally heard horse hooves. Pete threw open the door. Quentin stumbled in, soaked to the bone, covered in mud. Dr. Watson right behind him. "The baby," Quentin managed. "Help the baby." Dr. Watson went to work immediately, examined Emma, asked questions, mixed medicines. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. "She'll be all right," he said. "It's fever from teething, common but scary. I'll leave some powders. Keep her cool. She should be fine by tomorrow." The relief in the room was palpable. Savannah started crying, great sobbing gasps of relief. Sarah hugged her. Pete clapped Quentin on the shoulder. And Emma, the medicine already working, fell into a peaceful sleep. After Dr. Watson left, after Sarah and Pete had gone to bed, Savannah and Quentin sat by the fire. Emma was asleep in Savannah's arms, breathing easy now, color back in her cheeks. "You could have died out there," Savannah said quietly. Quentin was slumped in his chair, exhausted, muddy, but his eyes were alert. "Couldn't lose her," he said simply. "Couldn't lose either of you." Savannah looked at him. This man who'd ridden through a storm for her daughter, this man who'd never asked for anything in return. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About Emma's father, about why I really came west." "You don't have to." "I do," she interrupted. "You deserve the truth. All of it." So she told him about Thomas Whitmore, about the promises and the betrayal, about being dismissed without a reference, about the boarding house and the mail-order bride advertisement. "Emma isn't my niece," she said, even though she knew he'd already guessed. "She's my daughter, born out of wedlock, the result of my foolishness and a man's lies." Quentin listened without interrupting. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know." She looked at him, startled. "You know?" "I've known since the beginning," he said. "The way you look at her, the way you hold her. That's not an aunt's love. That's a mother's love." "And you still helped me?" "Of course I did," he said. "Savannah, I don't care who Emma's father was. I don't care about the circumstances of her birth. What I care about is that she's a beautiful little girl who deserves a good life, and that you're a brave woman who fought to give her one." He leaned forward. "That man in Boston, he made promises he didn't keep. I understand why you're scared to trust again. But I'm not him, and I'm going to prove it to you." "You already have," Savannah whispered. "Tonight, riding through that storm, you proved it." She set Emma gently in her basket, turned to face Quentin fully. "I don't need the house in town. I don't need the property or the money. I need this. I need you. I need us." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Because I need you to be sure." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. And then, finally, he kissed her. Soft and gentle at first, then deeper. Years of loneliness and hope and fear all pouring into that one moment. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "Marry me," Quentin said, "not because you need protecting, not because Emma needs a father, but because I love you, because I want to spend my life with you, because we're already a family. Let's make it official." "Yes," Savannah said. "Yes, I'll marry you." They married on Christmas Eve. The whole town came. Even the ones who'd gossiped and judged. They came because Mrs. Piton had led the way, had stood up in church the Sunday before, and said that anyone who had a problem with Savannah Mitchell could take it up with her. And nobody wanted to take it up with Victoria Piton. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Evergreen boughs and candles. Sarah as matron of honor. Pete giving Savannah away, since she had no family. And Emma, almost 1 year old now, toddling down the aisle, scattering flower petals. The whole congregation laughing with delight. When Quentin and Savannah said their vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. At the reception at the Double R, Mrs. Caldwell presented them with a gift. "It's a donation," she said, "from several women in town, for when you're ready to open that home for women in need. We think Miss Savannah's property in town would be perfect for it." Savannah was overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll do it," Mrs. Peaton said, stepping forward. "Say you'll help the next woman who finds herself alone and scared. Say you'll give her the same chance you were given." Savannah looked at Quentin. He nodded. "We'll do it," she said, "together." Haven House opened its doors in the summer of 1876. The first woman to knock was named Rebecca, 19 years old, baby in her arms, fear in her eyes. Savannah opened the door and saw herself 5 years earlier. "Come in," she said, smiling. "You and your baby are safe here." She pulled Rebecca into a hug, and the cycle continued. Over the years, Haven House sheltered hundreds of women, helped them get back on their feet, gave them the same chance Savannah had been given. Mrs. Peaton kept her promise, became the biggest donor, spent hours there, helping, counseling, loving the women she couldn't save when she was 17. Pete lived to see the first decade of Haven House, died peacefully in 1890, with Savannah holding his hand. Sarah eventually married her Denver suitor. He moved to Willow Creek, supported her school. They never had children of their own, but helped raise dozens through education. And Quentin and Savannah. They had 35 years together. 3 children, Emma, and 2 more. 7 grandchildren. A ranch that prospered. A love that never wavered. When Quentin passed in 1910, Savannah held his hand and whispered, "Thank you for keeping your promise, for holding both of us." She lived another 15 years, long enough to see Emma graduate from college, long enough to see Haven House become an institution, long enough to know she'd made a difference. I finish my story as the sun starts to set. The young social worker from Austin has filled 3 notebooks with my rambling. "And all of them?" she asks. "Where are they now?" "Emma runs Haven House," I say. "Has for the last 5 years since her mother passed. She's got 3 children of her own, all of them involved in the work. Sarah's school is still the biggest in the county. She died 2 years ago. Her husband followed 6 months later, couldn't bear to be without her. Mrs. Peaton left her entire estate to Haven House when she died in 1910, 3 months after Quentin. I think losing him broke something in her. He'd become like a son to her in the end." "And Rebecca?" the social worker asks. "The first woman at Haven House?" I smile. "She married a local farmer, raised her daughter here, has grandchildren now, volunteers at Haven House every week." The social worker closes her notebook, looks at the sign above the door. "It's an incredible story," she says. "It's a true story," I correct. "Not all true stories are incredible, but this one mattered." I stand up, old bones creaking. "You know what the lesson is?" I ask. She waits. "It's that one person saying yes when everyone else says no can change everything. Quentin Ross said yes to a stranger with a baby, and from that one yes came all of this." I gesture to Haven House, to the town beyond, to 54 years of women saved and children raised and lives changed. "Sometimes changing the world doesn't take much," I say. "Just takes one good person willing to stand up when it matters." The social worker thanks me and leaves. I sit back down on the porch, watch the sun set over the prairie, and I think about Savannah Mitchell, who came west with nothing and left a legacy that's still growing. About Quentin Ross, who kept a promise to his dying mother and found a family in return. About all of us who witnessed it, who were changed by it. The wind picks up, carries the smell of autumn, and I hear Savannah's voice in my memory, clear as a bell. "Tell them," she'd said to me years ago when she knew she was dying. "Tell them it's worth it, being brave, taking the risk. Tell them love is always worth it." So I have, and I always will.